Bonjour à tous.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, both to those who are in the room and those who are on site at AXA.com. We will present the half-year results 2010 of AXA, presentation by Henri de Castries and Denis Duvergne. And in the room you have François Pierson and Gérald Darlin to answer your questions. The floor to Henri de Castries. Good morning, all. Welcome to this summer morning presentation as regards the results of our first half year. We can say that these are solid in an environment that has remained relatively volatile, as we have seen on the markets during the first half year. If we look into the major components of our results, you can see the stability of our revenue, which was not hide the fact that there are evolutions occurring that are solid and positive and result from the actions we have implemented. Denis will return to the details of these different action plans, but you will see later that there are some geographical regions where growth is strong, which are the areas of the world where we want to emphasize growth. This is offset by lesser growth in areas where margins are slightly less satisfactory. So behind an apparent stability of revenue, both in terms of geographies and products, are the choices that we have made to optimize the group's operations. The second point that we can state here is in the analysis of the results themselves, the underlying earnings are stable. Adjusted has a growth slightly under 30%. There is here, of course, an exceptional event, which is a divestment of our activities in the UK, where we have here recorded a loss of 1.5 billion euros in the loss of these activities. But it is an exceptional item, and yet we have very strong growth nearing 80% versus the same period last year. So you can see that behind very solid numbers, there are here evolutions going in the right direction. In life insurance, where NBV grows by 80%, as well as in P&C, where the combined ratio here has allowed us to increase the number of policies and to improve prices. All of this leads us to a very solid balance sheet. Now, the management of our capital was very active during this half year, as demonstrated by the numbers you see here on screen. Solvency levels have returned to pre-crisis levels. And I would say that we are redeploying our resources due to our divestment from the UK activities, which allows the group to bring in a little over 3 billion euros, which will be repositioned as the opportunities arise in strong growth areas. What else can we tell you in addition to the information on these numbers as regards our geographical, strategic, sales and human evolutions? The group has maintained its activity in all these areas. Of course, the divestment in resolution of the traditional share of our activities in the UK, as well as the continuance of our developments in emerging economies, although these are extremely limited in size. We have bought companies in Serbia and Romania to capture profitable growth wherever it lies. Second aspect here in P&C, the strength of the brand allows us to increase our presence. And end of June, we have nearly 30,000 additional clients, which is very good news because here we see our portfolios growing in volume during a period where, for technical reasons, we need to rather increase prices. It means that our commercial offer is attractive and is based on something other than just simple impact on prices, i.e. service quality is now recognized. As regards people, we continue to keep the group alive, to recruit and to further develop the career paths of our teams. This morning we have announced movement, which is that François Pierson will now dedicate full-time, after remarkable work done at the head of AXA France, will now dedicate all of his efforts on life and P&C activities group-wide, where we believe there is strong growth to be gained. And Nicolas Moreau has left the UK, where he was head of operations for several years, to replace François Pierson at the head of AXA France. Last point that I wanted to underscore is that we continue to be extremely active as regards our corporate responsibility. And one of the elements that we're particularly proud of is the AXA Fund for Research, which in the field of natural risks and longevity education has undertaken extremely interesting actions, which are selected by very high-level members of our scientific committee to help us assist researchers, not just in France, but also in a larger number of countries, because we have now funded such research plans in approximately 10 countries. So our activity levels have remained quite strong and have brought about results which in their own right are solid in a context which remains relatively uncertain. And Denis Deverne will now comment on these uncertainties and on these activities. Thank you, Henri. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would now like to comment the activities and results of H1. First of all, our business, strong resilience of our revenue in all areas, very slight progress over the preceding half year. The result here is due to both strong growth in the emerging economies and in other countries, and of a slowdown of growth where we have decided to preserve our margins. Life insurance activities are growing, although this remains modest at 1.5%, with stronger growth in Asia and North America. P&C stable, with an increase of plus 0.4%, particularly as regards personal lines, and a drop of 4% in commercial lines. So more selective underwriting in commercial lines, very strong proprietary networks in individual lines. Also, asset management has rebounded by plus 10.4%, which is essentially, of course, due to the improvement of the markets, but also to our strong focus. Now, a few minutes on life and savings. The margin on NBV has progressed, reaching 19%, the result of our selective approach. In the US, in France, in Japan, you see that new business has dropped significantly. We have not wanted to preserve our margins in these areas at all costs. In the US, evolutions are encouraging because the product we have launched at the beginning of this year, Retirement Cornerstone, first of all in the proprietary channel, and then at mid half year in third-party networks. Now this represents over 40% of new business. The product has a better margin and consumes less capital, so it certainly is off to a very good start, although a new business on the whole is down by 13%. In France, we voluntarily were less aggressive on what we call large personal lines where competition is fierce, and this also explains the drop in commercial line volumes where regulations were very favorable over the past few years, and the window granted the company to be able to transfer their retirement commitments has now been closed. So this has had an impact on commercial lines, but in personal lines we have had a stronger growth. In the rest of the world, we observe here high progression with a very dynamic context in Italy, thanks to our Monte Paschi JV, and where new business has progressed by 64%. This is the sign of how dynamic the Monte Paschi Bank is, but also thanks to the extension of the network. Now, in emerging countries, both in Central Europe and even more in Southeast Asia, we see here very strong progress in new business. As regards P&C, we can see a very contrasted evolution that I mentioned in my introduction. As far as private personal lines are concerned, we can see here a growth of 3.6%, which, as Henry was saying earlier on, mean that we bring in more clients, 700,000 individual policies net over the half year. And we have also been able to increase our prices because the prices have been dropped fairly severely over the past few years. We see that this situation is now changing, and the most spectacular increase, of course, in the UK at 8.6. But let us say that in most of our countries, we have been able to increase the prices. As far as commercial lines are concerned, there are several phenomena that we have seen appearing. First of all, we have sought to slightly increase our prices. And then the financial crisis, of course, has led to the fact that there are lower sums insured, and that these commercial lines now are sold through third-party networks or broker networks, and we have lost a little bit of business volume and have been more selective as regarded very negative impact risks. Contrasted evolution, but on the whole, we can say that it has been favorable to the group. Now, asset management. This is progressing by over 10%. Average assets under management is the reflection of the increase in the revenue. Our asset managers are still in net inflow down, but this is lower than first half 2009. AllianceBernstein in particular, this has been reduced very significantly, and we even have reached positive net inflow on the segment, and we've been able to stabilize your private asset management. So we can see here different numbers as regards personal lines and institutional investors. Essentially, this is due to the specific position of AXA Rosenberg, and this involves here a drop in business. Also for Rosenberg, AXA reaches the end of H1 2010 in positive inflow. Now, also, asset management is on the right trail for the future. Let us now go on to the financial results themselves. Underlying earnings in life and savings up 6%. This is, in fact, the translation of several occurrences. First of all, a hike in the financial margin of 21%, which comes both from the increase of the assets under management, and also the increase in the margin is the difference between interests received and interest credited, and also a hike in the commissions on assets and premiums of 9%, essentially carried forward by the hike in the number of assets under management, and a negative technical margin, which is essentially the result of the non-recurrence of positive exceptional items of H1 2009, and finally a drop in overheads, of which is associated essentially with stable administrative costs and a drop in deferred acquisition costs, amortizations rather. Now in P&C we see a drop of 9% in our results, with a combined ratio slightly down at 98.1% versus 98 in H109. This situation allows a certain degree of optimism as far as we're concerned, because behind this slight deterioration of our combined ratio, we can see a significant improvement of the combined ratio during the financial year, down by 1.5. And also there is a lower impact on the provisions of the preceding financial years. So this, in fact, is a positive signal for us for the future. Our level of the level of charges we face associated with natural events is lower. This year we have had the Xynthia storm. Last year we had Kirill, and therefore, as regards storms, the situation hasn't really changed year to year. The expense ratio is stable, and our financial result is down, mainly due to a lower yield in assets, due to the fact that interest rates have remained low throughout the first half year, and that in life insurance we have a lower rebound as well, which is why we invest at lower interest rates. As regards asset management, we can see a drop in our results of 15%, and this drop is exclusively associated with non-recurrent tax credits for AllianceBernstein, because this is the real underlying issue. We have a hike in our revenue that I've already commented upon, which is plus 10%, whereas the increase in overheads is only 5%. So the situation here is also fairly encouraging for the future. If we now look at these evolutions in a holistic manner, we can see a very limited drop in our financial highlights, which reflects the very contrasted situation. I had not mentioned international insurance, which is up 17% thanks to a strong result at AXA Corporate Solutions, the industrial insurer of the group. Now, let us look at our adjusted earnings. Adjusted earnings here covers the realized and unrealized capital gains minus asset impairment. We can see a very strong drop in asset impairment over this half year. They're only now at 200 million euros, and a increase of realized capital gain, which is to 200 million euros over this half year, so aligned with our mid-year indications, according to which we would be covering up to 300 million in realized capital gains, which means that our adjusted earnings have progressed by 19%, which is a fairly favorable position, and which is useful insofar as it is based on these adjusted earnings that we determine the dividend to be paid out. Now, as Henri de Castres has said, the net results have been largely impacted by the exceptional losses due to our divestment on a share of our activities in the UK. We can see very clear improvement in the valuation of our portfolio. As far as the other issues are concerned, I do not need to comment them, except perhaps to say that with the exception of the loss due to our divestment in the UK, we would in fact have had net results up by 80%. Now, a few words on our balance sheet. Shareholders' equity have reached now 48.6 billion euros, particularly due to the results generated over the half year and also in the variation here in unrealized capital gains. The stock of these unrealized capital gains are still significantly important and reach now almost 6 billion euros. A few comments perhaps on our financial structure per se. We have a financial debt which is now at 16 billion euros and this can be explained in several ways. First of all, the fact that we have issued in April 2010 a subordinate debt of 1.3 billion euros to face up to reimbursements scheduled in December of a debt of the same amount. And this issue went very well. And the second reason, of course, can be exchange operations where the dollar has become stronger over the same period, and some of these coverages have had an impact. However, we still are at 29%, which is quite satisfactory in terms of ratio. And this gearing does not take into account the impact of our divestments from the UK, which would bring this ratio down to 27%. But this operation is certainly going to take place before the end of Q3. Now, we can see that the impact here on our results is above 9%, which is something that makes us feel extremely confident as regards the financial solidity of the group in the long term. A few words on how we have structured our general fund assets. You can see that this is fairly stable because the bond portfolio still represents 81% of the whole, and we see that our bond portfolios have been reassessed over this half year. The impact, once again, in the drop in interest rates, and this impact was much more significant than the widening spread, which of course is a testimony to the quality of our portfolio, because if this had not been the case, then the widened spread would have had a negative impact and would not have offset the rates. Around the Mediterranean region, we have some breaking news as well. The situation has remained stable. And we can see that our portfolio as regards state loans has in fact behaved properly. Real estate has slightly increased, alternative investments as well. As far as the other issues are concerned, you can see that this portfolio remains stable and of high quality. Now, our Solvency I ratio profitability level has reached 188%, the combination in the hike of unrealized capital gains and the results of our half year. This level is comparable to the levels that we posted prior to the crisis, demonstrating our solid financial model and the quality of our risk management. Thank you for your attention, and I will now return the floor to Henri de Castres. Right, so in all, you can see that these results are solid, robust, and that they certainly mean that we continue in the future to apply our current approach to pursue the development of our targeted activities to reinforce our growth profile and capital allocation. This is very often costly, particularly for banks and for insurance companies because of Solvency II. This means that we will have to be selective in what we underwrite and actively spread the capital between product lines and geographies. When you look at life and savings, P&C, what we are trying to do is fairly simple to understand. We are trying in life and savings to deploy our activities in areas where there is strong new business value and in geographies where the profile is on a par with that. In other words, protection and healthcare, and tomorrow perhaps dependency insurance, are areas where we want to put emphasis more perhaps than on the traditional savings, unit linked or general fund savings, which does not mean that we will not work on these areas anymore. It means that when the situation is such as the one we're facing now, we need to make a choice and perhaps reallocate the way in which we deal with these different areas. As far as geographies are concerned, you clearly see in the figures of each one that we have, for example, higher risk for personal lines in P&C, perhaps less for commercial lines where we are highly selective. So we try during these difficult periods to put the emphasis on competitive advantages, one of which today in a still uncertain economic context is the strength of the brand, because it is attractive and persuasive to a certain number of partners and clients and attract them to us, and this is certainly in itself a premium. This is what I wanted to say in my conclusion, and I think that we can now take your questions either in the room or online. Are there questions in the room? Yes. Could you please introduce yourself and then ask your questions? Iman Nansky, and I work for EasyBourse, the internet platform. First question, what is your opinion as regards the lesser net inflow? And also, how do you assess the reform of taxation and guarantees and warranties around this product? The idea here being to simply conclude by wondering whether the attractiveness of the product today could perhaps not be endangered or jeopardized for French households. This is a very Franco-French question. I think we can give it a simple answer. One, life insurance is still the preferred vehicle of the French as regards stocks and flows. So it certainly is a very significantly important long-term form of savings. Important as well to fund the economy. This is something that we must not forget. The France and Europe both have a competitive advantage, which is the high yield on savings, but this must be stabilized if we want to generate growth in business. And today, although we have been able to see a certain drop in inflow, it remains nonetheless the preferred instrument for the French in terms of savings. But there are think tanks reflecting on the tax advantages associated with life insurance. To answer your second question, I do not think that we can consider that life insurance is a tax haven, quote unquote, because this is offset by the need to willingly take on very long-term holdings in this area. So the tax advantage in life insurance is linked to very long-term investments that was now favored by the state because it allowed long-term investments in return. This is something that I feel very important to underscore at a moment when Europe, more than ever, has to be able to find an alternative to investments and public debt. The fact that inflow is slowing down slightly on the French market is due to the fact that the first half year was fairly uncertain and turbulent during the first part of the year. And as usual, this makes our clients very much risk averse, particularly as regards long-term risks. They would rather, they would rather invest in the long term and make sure that the storm blows away before they make any other short-term decisions. Now, you can see that although some competitors have been perhaps more active than we have refused to sign major business volumes as regards the underwritten premiums that have low margins. We are not at all interested in this. As a matter of fact, the regulations are going to be more and more stringent because it does not seem to us that this involves long-term life insurance business. These are people who are seeking guaranteed rates over short-term periods, which is not at all something that we want to do. Last item here, the comparison with the savings accounts. Of course, we'll see a slight hike in the interest rates of these savings accounts. Nonetheless, these rates are between 1% to 2%, which means that over a long-term period, it is not the investment of the century. And when we compare what life insurance invested in unit-linked products can bring in, then I think that within 5, 10, or 15 years, comparison will be obvious for everyone. This is what I wanted to say in answer to your question. François, do you want to add something? I would just like to say, as regards the question on guaranteed rates and the new regulations that have been enforced as of August 1, we know that these rates will have a threshold and an upper and lower threshold, and so it will in fact here be twice that of the savings accounts. But you know, when Henri says that we have avoided to make commitments in some areas, this does not mean that we have turned away from normal approaches to business. We have stayed away from businesses where the guaranteed rate was in excess and not at all reasonable. And we can say that what was enforced on August 1 is certainly the reason for this position, because the comparison between us and the different players on the market will soon be more stable, and you will see who was right. QC from Bluebell. Where do you stand now with AXA Asia Pacific? And secondly, can you tell us which activities could be up for sale, such as AXA Rosenberg or something else in the UK? As far as AXA APH is concerned, there's nothing new versus what has happened in the preceding days. In other words, the Australian Bank is still discussing with the competition authorities to try and find a level playing field where we could perhaps rediscuss this proposal. As far as AXA Rosenberg is concerned, we are not for the moment considering to divest. And as regards the companies that we wish to sell or buy, it is not accustomed to give information prior to the actual fact. Now, I have said that we are quite pragmatic as regards capital allocation. There are areas where we are seeking growth, both in terms of product lines and geographies. I mentioned in particular protection, healthcare, and life insurance, and risks of individuals in P&C. And as far as geographies is concerned, I have mentioned several emerging economies, and there's nothing new to add. Denis, do you want to add something? Well, just to clarify that as far as the UK is concerned, we are currently divesting some of our life insurance businesses, but we are maintaining very strong presence in P&C healthcare insurance in the UK and in life insurance as well on the segment that we consider to be the most promising. And here our business portfolio is fully satisfactory, and we hope that it will help us yield very high performance levels. Next question. Is there or are there long distance questions? Any question in the room? Yes, Geraldine. As regards asset management, I'm not very familiar with this. Could you please explain why there has been less inflow and what is happening at AXA Rosenberg? Dennis, do you want to answer this? As regards AllianceBernstein, we are seeing a drop in the inflow, but this is much more modest. And it essentially results from the fact that asset management performance levels in 2008 were low, and that this, of course, has had an impact not only over financial year 2008, but over a 3-year period after that. The performance levels have clearly improved, but there is always a sort of latency effect when there is a poor performance in asset management. This brings companies who are there as advisors to pension funds to deteriorate the ranking of such companies, and it always takes time for this rating to be improved, and this has a direct impact on net inflow. Now, there's a very positive signal that is appearing, is that the number of mandates, i.e. gross inflow, has increased significantly, and we therefore believe that we are not far. There is a positive month, which was the month of June, that we are not far from finding ourselves again in a positive net inflow situation. Once again, this is the latency effect or the deferred effect of a poor investment performance in 2008. At AXA IM, we also are seeing that the situation is improving as regards appraisals on performance. And at AXA Rosenberg, as I indicated earlier on, the net inflow is positive. And we have also announced, as regards AXA Rosenberg in April, that we had discovered a mistake in one of the schemes of a quantitative asset managers determining their investment choices based on IT software, which analyzed the markets. We discovered that there had been a mistake between 2008 and 2009. This has since then been corrected, but the announcement of the mistake, the error in the IT program, of course, has very negatively impacted the inflow over that period. So we have decided here to provision 64 million euros over this half year to take into account the situation and to therefore be able to pay out the indemnities of AXA Rosenberg clients. This is a situation that we're closely monitoring, and we believe that the worst is now behind us because we have both corrected the IT mistake and we have been able to analyze its consequences on client portfolios. Yes. In the U.S., you have said that you are focusing on life insurance profitable products. But what about variable annuities? The comments that you made earlier on as regards the new product Retirement Cornerstone seems to be the example, the positive signs that you're receiving from the U.S. in this area. Well, as far as variable annuities are concerned, we have positive signals as regards a product mix. We have positive signals as well as regards market share, because our market share, which is 14.7% Q4 of last year and Q1 of this year, is, according to the first indications, up now at 5% for this period of the year. But of course, there are highly volatile markets and widening spreads, which have led to a result in our hedging activities, which is negative for half one, and as a whole, profitable investments for 2010. But our hedging activities have certainly shown a loss. Any other questions? Microphone, just one last clarification. We're talking about the perspective and results. do you believe that you will be able to restore a positive situation in these two areas where you are negative in your results? We are not negative in our results. We're positive in our results. And as regards growth in life insurance, we are also positive. Our revenues have increased in this area, and so have our results, significantly so. I think that you are alluding to the fact that there is a lesser inflow because the net inflow has increased, but there are more people who have in fact withdrawn money, more so than those who have invested new money. So this is why the return to a balanced situation will take a little while, as Denis told you earlier on. Yes. Séverine Saunier, La Tribune. I had two questions concerning France. My first question concerns, of course, here your balance sheet. Not the balance sheet, excuse me. The conclusions you draw from the past 10 years and the evolution of your business. And then with the arrival in France of Nicolas Moreau, is this the translation of a change in strategy? You announced earlier on that there was a drop in new business and that you wanted to take a new position or stronger position on dependency insurance and on healthcare. Does this mean that this will be materialized in concrete terms in France? First of all, I'm going to make François Pierson blush. The appraisal of what he has done in France is absolutely remarkable. When you see where AXA France now stands versus what happened at the beginning of the years 2000 in the French market, we have very strongly consolidated our position. Activities are very positive. You can see what the margins are in life insurance. You can take a close look at the combined ratios in P&C. Remember that at the beginning of this century, quote unquote, when we both came into our position, we're at 114. Today we can always talk about whether we are at the top or at the bottom of a cycle. But if 10 years ago we were told, this was throughout the group, 98%, because the French ratios were always better, slightly better than those of the other countries of the group. So if we thought that as of 98 we were thinking maybe that it was still possible to optimize, we were very happy at this prospect because it seemed impossible at the time. So the appraisal of a decade, not quite a decade but almost, both as regards P&C and life insurance, is an extremely positive appraisal. And if I have now asked François to focus on P&C at group level, it is because I believe that he can, by dedicating his energies full-time to this business area, allow us to climb up another rung of the ladder of success. So I think that this is a very positive appraisal. Will the arrival of Nicolas Moreau demonstrate new strategies? My answer is no. The major targeted areas have been defined. You see that we are more selective as regards the life insurance market as we do on the P&C market. And when we say that we want to now emphasize products that have stronger yields and satisfactory margins, protection in healthcare is not just in France, it's all over the board. And we have 90 million clients worldwide, and all of these clients are insufficiently covered as regards protection or healthcare insurance. When we have proprietary or non-proprietary networks which are efficient, and when we have a brand which is a brand that is recognized and where people are prepared to work with this brand, then the least we can do is sell products which meet our clients' expectations. This is a quite natural position. This isn't a change in culture, it's an evolution. It's an evolution such as the ones that we've always carried out to help the management improve. Yes, this is a very brief question. I can see exposure 300 million euros in Greece. If I remember properly, you've made an announcement which was 500. How have you reduced this exposure? Is this something that you will continue to work on, Denis? Or Gerald, maybe? Gerald, you want to answer that? This is over a portfolio of 440 billion euros. So, I mean, we're talking peanuts. Yeah, but there, of course, here has been a maturity date to middle term and microphone, please, sir. You know, in these countries, we have regular maturity dates. We have short-term, medium-term investments, and we will wait. We will see whether in the future we intend to reinvest in the country. For the moment, we are not renewing investments in Greece. This being said, we are present as insurers in all of these countries, and the insurance companies present in these countries are investing in the state debts. What we have reduced are new investments in state debts from insurance companies in the group. We have an activity level in Greece that is fully satisfactory to us, and we intend to continue to develop it further. Any other questions? Okay. No further questions? No long distance questions? Yes. Very last question at the back of the room here. A generic question as regards accounting standards. Do you have any comments on the project that was presented by ISB and on its impact to come for AXA? Well, it's a little bit too early to comment on a project that was published or made public 2 days ago. We can say that it is in fact aligned with our expectations. And I would say that the interest of the profession in this area is to make sure that what we have under IFRS and under Solvency II is are as aligned as possible to avoid an over-divergence of standards. We can also say that in this project we still see that there are mechanisms which will lead to more artificial volatility than what we would like to see, but this is only a project. And I think that the authority in question is expecting comments on our part. And of course, we will try with the other professional federations we work with to make constructive comments in this area. But I think that the authority itself has decided to open its ears to our comments in the area. Right. If there are no further questions, I suggest that we suspend the session, or rather close it. And I wish wonderful holidays to all those of you who intend to take some. Thank you.